Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and today I am going to sow some blue poppy seeds. These are Meconopsis seeds. Now, everyone who sees the blue poppy just wants to get their hands on it and grow it in their garden. However, the cheapest way to get substantial numbers of the plant and to just basically get your hands on the plant is to grow it from seed. It can be done, but it's a little bit tricky. And if you bear with me today, we're going to go through the process, and at the end of it, I hope that you feel confident to grow your own Meconopsis from seed. You are very welcome to the video, and if you are new here, a big welcome to the channel. I'm Rachel and I garden in what roughly equates to a zone 9. Now here in Ireland we don't use that zone system that you have in the US, but my hardiness level roughly equates to zone 9. And today we're in my greenhouse, which is an unheated space, and that's exactly what we need to sow these Meconopsis seeds. So Meconopsis are a plant that need a cold stratification to germinate, and we'll go over that in a bit more detail for the moment. It's also the end of January, I think it's the 30th today, so that's the perfect time to get these bad boys underway. So today we're going to sow 4 different types of Meconopsis, and the first one we're going to sow is Meconopsis grandis. Now I didn't collect these myself from my own plants. These are ones I've had in a plant swap or a seed swap, let's just say. So there's grandis, there's also Belei, which is also a beautiful blue poppy, and the ones that I've collected from my own garden are Lingholm. Now there are various hybrid varieties of the blue poppy, and some of them are sterile and some of them are not. Some of them produce viable seed, and Lingholm is one that produces viable seed, and this is what I have here. And then the final one is a yellow Meconopsis. So this is one called paniculata, and these are ones I've collected from my own garden, from my own seed. It's a beautiful plant that's really grown for its foliage rather than the flower. Now the first thing I want to say about Meconopsis seed is that it must be fresh. You can actually collect the seed and sow straight away, but there are certain problems with that. If you do sow when the seed is completely fresh, you'll have excellent germination, but then you'll have the problem of bringing those very small plants through their first winter. However, if you collect the seed and you store them in a fridge, airtight in a fridge at, I suppose, roughly 4 degrees centigrade, then you should have good germination when you get around to sowing those seeds. So if you've stored your seed correctly in the fridge, you can sow it from December to February, which is what we're doing now. Now, as you can see, my seed hasn't been stored in the fridge. You can see that because the pods are still on it. So if germination is poor, it's probably because my seed wasn't stored correctly. And of course, the seed I've received in the seed exchange, I have no idea how that was stored, but let's hope it was stored correctly. First up, we're going to make our mix. And we're using an ericaceous mix, which is particularly for acid-loving plants like Meconopsis. But the mix has to be porous. So in order to achieve that, we're going to add horticultural sand, which is this substance here, and or perlite, which is this white porous substance here. And both of these will help aerate the mix. Now I can't tell you exactly how much to put in, but the test is when you have it all mixed up and you squeeze your mix, if the potting mix falls apart and doesn't hold together, then you've got the porosity right. I'm using small seed trays for sowing my Meconopsis, and I like this one because it's just that bit deeper, allowing the plant to achieve a decent root run before it needs to be potted on. I fill the seed tray with my mix and just press it down slightly to make sure there are no air pockets. And then finally what I'm going to do is to use horticultural grit to top the tray with. Now, as you can see, this is grit, so it is a little bit larger than the sand we used earlier. And I'm just going to place it on the top of the mix. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm doing this, why I'm putting horticultural grit on top of my tray before I even sow the seeds. And the answer is twofold. Number one, Meconopsis seeds need light to germinate, so we shouldn't put the grit on top of the seed. And number two, I have observed how these plants germinate from my own experience in the garden. So I had a big clump of Meconopsis near my hardy orchid bed for many years, and the best germination I had from just self-sowing was when the seed of the Meconopsis happened to fall on the gritty top of the hardy orchid bed. Now, as we have observed from making up our mix here, Meconopsis like a well-drained mix, and that's what I had in my hardy orchid bed, but also the top was completely layered with grit and they just germinated so well in there. So I thought it was a bit counterintuitive, a bit strange, because this is a plant that likes moisture, but on the other hand it also likes everything that's well drained. So I'm kind of emulating those conditions here by topping the mix with horticultural grit. Now what I'm going to do is just bottom water this. So I'm going to place this in a little bit of water and leave it for an hour or so until the water is moved up by osmosis into the mix and it is completely moist. These are the trays I prepared earlier and they're sitting in water. And you can see by the way it's dripping down there. And if I just put my finger in, I can tell that this soil is well moist now, so it's ready to sow. Now the trick here is to sow thinly. I know that the temptation is to sow quite thickly, and that's because we know Meconopsis are a difficult plant to germinate. So if you're thinking that they're going to germinate erratically over a 3-month period, then you might think, well, you know, I'm going to sow a lot of them here because only one's going to come up in each cell. But do try and discipline yourself to sow maybe 2 or 3 per cell. Now you don't need to worry about the little seedlings getting their roots down into the mix. They're going to do it. They're going to get past this grit and just go down there. These seeds are now going to be left here in my greenhouse. It's the end of January. I can expect temperatures to get quite low. So it is going to be 0 degrees some nights. It's going to be maybe 4 degrees. It might even drop below 0. Now, this is called stratification, and many seeds require stratification to germinate. So very often they're seeds from my zone, from the temperate zone, that are used to getting a cold winter. So the seed knows that it shouldn't germinate in the middle of winter when the temperatures are cold, it's just going to die. But it wants to germinate in spring, so it anticipates cold and then warm, and then it breaks into growth. These seeds need stratification, but they need something called moist stratification. And of course, each seed is different. There are seeds that require warm stratification, there are seeds that require dry stratification, and many seeds require no stratification at all. So you really need to look up what to do with your particular seed. Now, with most of the Meconopsis, they require moist stratification. I think the exception is Pernicious. That doesn't need this kind of stratification, and perhaps some of the more obscure ones. Now, there's a big misconception out there, and I remember back in the day when I was in a gardening club, you know, you'd lend seeds to somebody and you'd say they need to be moist stratified, and people would say, oh, I'll just stick them in the fridge. Well, that won't work. It may work with some seeds, but not with many of them. And moist stratification is a process where the seed needs certain things to happen in a certain order. So you might have tropical seeds like Strelitzia, for example, with a hard coating, and the coating needs to be broken down. And then when it's broken down and moisture gets into the coating inside to the seed, then it triggers the suppression of an enzyme that inhibits germination, and that's what we're looking at here. So things need to be done in a certain order. So if you stick your seeds in the fridge, well, it's going to help them last longer, but in this case it's not going to help them germinate. So you need to sow them. You need to sow them in moist compost, and then you need to cool them. So now it's a waiting game, and Meconopsis can take quite a while to germinate. Their germination is considered erratic, so they can germinate anytime up till 3 months from now. That's 90 days. Seeds need to be kept moist, not soggy, but moist, which is why I put the lid over them to just trap the moisture that's in there in. And when your plants germinate, and once they have like 3 sets of real leaves, then you need to pot them on individually, and then basically you're on the home run. But they are a plant you need to keep an eye on. So if you have them in the greenhouse like I do, then they can't be left in full sun. So once it gets really, really sunny here, this is a moisture loving, shade loving plant, it needs to be moved to a shady position. You can leave these outdoors if your climate is such that it allows you to do that, or you could try germinating your plants in the fridge, because fridge temperatures should be ideal really to get these bad boys going. And once they have the moisture in there from being sown, then that should be okay. I guess you're going to check back and see how I do with these. I'm a bit apprehensive really, because I do know that my seed wasn't as fresh as it should have been, and then obviously the other ones that I acquired, you never know when you buy seed how fresh it is really. But we shall see. I've certainly grown these from seed myself in the past and they've done well, but I do know that Grandis, which is one of the ones I'm sowing today, is extremely erratic in terms of when it germinates. I guess that's all for the moment. Just to tell you that I did make a video before, or part of a video that deals with how to grow the blue Meconopsis poppy, which everybody loves, and it was in collaboration with the Australian channel The Horticulturalists with Stephen Ryan, and I will link to that video in the details down below. The video might actually be on his channel, I can't remember now, but I'll sort it out and put the correct link to the correct one down below, because each of us talked about several plants. So I think maybe when I talked about the Meconopsis, it's in the video he put up on his channel. So anyway, you'll find the correct one down below, and that will tell you all about how I grow Meconopsis and have had success with them. And if you look at it, then perhaps you'll have success too. It is a beautiful one, and definitely one that it's worth persisting with. So I guess that's it. I guess I've come to the end of this video on growing Meconopsis from seed. It was supposed to be the blue Meconopsis, but we've also grown the yellow monocarpic one too, so fingers crossed for all of them. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video. And when I have some news on these plants, then, well, you're going to hear from me. Thanks as always for watching. Bye.